Friday the 13th, The Mask of Jason Voorhees. Chapter 13, Comeuppance. Phil felt the tingle of arousal in his groin when he entered the reception area of the Cunningham County Coroner's Office and saw the receptionist, Guadalupe Sanchez, dressed in a tight-fitting black dress and black feathered boa, lounging behind her desk reading a magazine. This was nothing unusual for him, except that this time, mixed with his desire, was hatred. How many times had he made his feelings for her clear, just to have her laugh in his face and brush him off like so much dirt? "Hey, Lupe," Phil said as he approached the desk. "Is Dr. Bob in the back?" "What you think?" she said with pouty fire-engine red lips, barely glancing up from her magazine. "The doc's been working his ass off, and those autopsies of the jocks and cheerleaders because someone wasn't here to help." "I was at home sick," Phil said. Guadalupe looked up at him with stone eyes. "I called your place 6 times yesterday." "Sorry, whatever hit me really knocked me for a loop. I had to crawl to the bathroom just to puke." "I feel sorry for you," she said, though it was obvious that the opposite was true. "You still should have called. Then the doctor could have gotten some backup while you got over whatever was hanging over you." Then she went back to her magazine. That was it, he thought. So this bitch actually thought he was getting over a drunken stupor? Which was amusing since he never drank liquor. How little she really thinks of me, he thought. Well, soon both she and this town will know your true value. "Oh, yes, they will," he said under his breath. "What?" she said, glancing up from her magazine, again annoyed. "Oh, nothing," Phil said. "Just talking to myself." "Uh-huh," she said absently. "Well, everyone needs to have somebody in their life." "Well, as much as this has been the pleasure of my day," he said sarcastically, "I have to leave you now. I need to see Dr. Bob." "Whatever," she said, this time without looking up at him again. Heading down the hall to the examination room, Phil cursed under his breath. "Fucking bitch." "I see this lady has hit a chord with you," the voice said, amused. "What was it? Did that lovely rose back there catch you with her thorns and draw blood? Or was it that she didn't feel you were man enough for her?" "That's none of your fucking business," Phil said, incensed. "Oh, yes. I sense the fire burning in you. I sense the anger that can only come from one who has been spurned," the voice told him. "I said shut up about that," Phil said, his anger increasing. "Wouldn't it be a pleasure to show that bitch who's boss?" "Oh, I will when the time comes," Phil said with an unpleasant smile. "What are you babbling about back there?" he heard Guadalupe yell from the reception desk. "Oh, nothing important," he said, trying to sound pleasant. "I don't doubt it," she said dismissively. Heading through the swinging doors of the examination room, he saw Dr. Bob standing in the corner, bent over a burned-looking naked male, which was laid out on a gurney. "Though the subject is partially burned, I've determined that this wasn't the cause of death. The cause of death was from blood loss due to nearly 8,000 rodent-like bites covering the body," Dr. Bob said into the micro-tape recorder he held in his right hand. As Phil approached Dr. Bob, he must have heard him because he turned off the recorder and put it on the edge of the gurney. Then the doctor turned toward him. "Ah, finally making an appearance, I see," Dr. Bob said, though his tone was less than casual. "I'm sorry about that, Doc," Phil said, trying to sound sincere. Guess I caught something. I was totally out of it all day yesterday." "Really?" Bob said. "And what about today? You should have called." "Well, what can I say?" Phil said, picking up a long, thick, needle-like probe from a nearby instrument table as he passed. "I guess it totally crossed my mind." Then, before Dr. Bob knew what was happening, Phil rammed the probe into his gut. A look of shock mixed with disbelief and pain crossed Dr. Bob's face as he spasmed and jerked the probe free from Phil's grip. Dr. Bob stumbled backwards and bumped into the gurney, sending it and its contents careening into the wall. "What in the name of hell are you doing?" the voice screamed in his head. Dr. Bob fell to his knees, a look of terror on his face. "Why?" he asked, his voice a pained croak. "Let's just say I got tired of living in your shadow," Phil told him before he pulled the probe out of Dr. Bob's gut, sending a stream of dark blood spilling on the floor. Dr. Bob spasmed one final time and fell to the floor in the puddle of his own blood. "Have you totally gone off of your nut?" the voice asked in disbelief. "We needed that man." "No, I needed that man to be just the way he is now, dead," Phil said with satisfaction. "But the plan," the voice said, now sounding thoroughly confused. "The plan is going just the way it's supposed to. This way we don't have to go to the trouble to convince Dr. Bob to write out the paperwork to get Stephen into the evidence room." "But who's going to sign the order?" "You forget who gets stuck with all the paperwork around here and who, on occasion, has had to forge the signature of a certain lazy-ass coroner," Phil reminded the voice with pride. "And what are we supposed to do about the sheriff's signature?" "We have files and files in the cabinets. All kinds of documents with the sheriff's signature on them," Phil said. "All it'll take is maybe an hour and a couple pieces of paper and problem solved." "That still leaves us the problem of when we get to the sheriff's office and present the request," the voice said. "And why do you think that's a problem?" he asked, feigning ignorance. "I'm thinking about the sheriff," the voice said. "Oh, I'm sure the sheriff will be too busy to notice," Phil said with an amused smile. "And what shall we do with your receptionist friend?" Phil didn't answer, but his smile widened and he felt that tingle in his groin again. "Hey, Lupe," Phil said 15 minutes later when he came into the reception hall dressed in a blood-splattered surgical gown. "Dr. Bob needs you in the back for a moment." Guadalupe looked up at him with a mix of surprise and annoyance. "You must be fucking kidding me." "The doc was very insistent," Phil said, feigning annoyance. "I'm not going back there," she said. "I've never had to go back there." "Well, now you do," Phil insisted. "And I'd get my ass back there if you want to keep this cushy job." Reluctantly, Guadalupe got up from behind her desk and slowly started down the hall, with Phil following right behind her. "I'm going to want a raise if I'm going to be expected to do anything like this again," she told him. "Oh, don't worry. I'm sure you'll get what you deserve," Phil said, amused. Heading inside the examination room, Guadalupe looked around the empty room and turned to Phil. "What the fuck's going on in here?" she said, glaring at him. "Where the hell's Dr. Bob?" "He was here just a minute ago," he said, sounding convincingly surprised. "Actually, he was right over here when I last saw him." He maneuvered her in front of one of the 3 examination tables. This one had a sheet covering its occupant. "Can I leave now?" Guadalupe asked, clearly incensed by her surroundings. "But I thought we were looking for the doc," he said, heading over to the table and tapping on its metal frame a couple of times. "I want out of here," she said as she started backing up. "You're freaking me out." "Oh, I'm sorry," he said, amused. "Am I really freaking you out?" "Where the fuck is Dr. Bob?" Guadalupe demanded, now frantic. "Dr. Bob," Phil said, tapping the table one last time. "Oh, I remember now. He's right here." Then he pulled the sheet off the corpse on the table. It was Dr. Bob. Phil had cut him open from his collarbone to his groin. Then he removed Dr. Bob's stomach, intestines, liver, and kidneys and placed them on the table next to the body. Guadalupe let out a terrified scream and started to run for the door. But before she could make it to the door, Phil was on her. He grabbed the ends of her feathered boa, which she had wrapped around her neck, and pulled hard, jerking her back. Then, before she could do anything to stop him, he looped the boa around her neck again and pulled it tight. Gagging, Guadalupe started jerking around and clawing at the boa, which was now cutting off her windpipe. Then she started pounding him in the ribs with her elbows and stomping on his feet. But none of this had an effect on him. He was committed. "Yes, yes, that's the way to do it," the voice in his head said. "I have to say, my boy, you are a natural." In his mind, Phil was reliving all the Saturday nights he'd spent at Smokey's pub watching Guadalupe throw herself at the low-life loggers from the Ampex Logging Company. It had always bothered him because she always treated those scummy, sweaty, uneducated tree choppers like gold while treating him like dirt. With every memory that passed through his skull, he pulled the boa tighter. And as he tightened the boa, he found himself becoming more and more sexually excited. After a time, he noticed that her pounding on him became steadily weaker, and her gagging deteriorated into a faint gurgle. Then she went limp, and her head rolled to the side. At that moment, his passion burst in his pants. Phil released the boa and managed to catch her in his arms as she fell forward. Then, leaning her against him, he slipped his arm around her waist and used his free hand to turn her face toward him. Her face was frozen in an expression of terror. Her mouth was open with her tongue hanging halfway out of it. With his free hand, Phil softened her expression and closed her eyes. Then, putting his lips to hers, he kissed her and pushed her tongue back into her mouth with his. "Forget what I said before," the voice said. "You are more than worthy." This brought a smile to his face. He looked at his victim again. "And now, Lupe, I can finally get to know you more intimately." Then he bent down, lifted her up fully into his arms, and headed for the empty examination table next to Dr. Bob. Ryan sat in his reclining chair and watched as Micki and Rashid looked over Pamela Voorhees' diaries. They had been going over the diaries together for the last 3 hours, and Ryan actually felt like a third wheel. Except for refilling the teapot with fresh boiling water and putting on a new pot of coffee, all he was able to do was watch. It was clear that over the years, Micki and Rashid had established a routine for researching, and he wasn't included. Finally, Micki closed the last of the books and shook her head. "How tragic," she said, looking over at Ryan. "Yes, I concur. Most unfortunate," Rashid said. "Would you two care to clue me in?" Ryan said, sitting forward in his chair. It's clear that after Jason killed Elias, the trauma drove Pamela insane," Micki told him. "In her last entries, all she writes about is her grief over Jason's death. Yet she mentions nothing about Elias's death. It almost seems like in her mind, she'd gone back before she and Lewis resurrected Jason, and it becomes blatantly clear that when her mind erased her past, it also erased her memories of having another child. She mentions Diana as Elias's bitch child, and even goes so far as saying that she had to be the product of an affair Elias had. It seemed that no matter how strongly people insisted, Pamela just wouldn't accept the idea that Diana was actually hers. Then, of course, eventually Pamela gave Diana over to the state, because she felt she could never love another child as much as she loved Jason." "That actually explains a lot about her behavior during the murders at Camp Crystal Lake," Ryan said. "But I still can't understand why the dagger didn't work on Jason when Pamela used it on him." "I believe I can offer you an explanation on that subject," Rashid said. "Based upon my readings and upon my own knowledge of these things, I would say that the reason the dagger didn't work was because it was both Mrs. Voorhees and Lewis that resurrected Jason. Thus, for the dagger to work, both parties would have to be there. In the case of you and Jessica, you were both representative of the individual bloodlines. Thus, the requirements for the dagger to work were met. But Lewis should have known this, Ryan said. I'm sure he did, Micki said. I think he wanted Pamela to fail. I also think it was his plan for Jason to kill Pamela. What makes you believe that, Micki? Rashid asked. Micki went on to tell Rashid and Ryan about the vision of the cave on Crystal Hill and Lewis's conversation with Creighton Duke. And Lewis said something about a plan he was having to advance, and how they wouldn't be safe around Jason after it was executed. I later asked Creighton about this, and he showed me a vision of the incident where Jason killed Elias. That does make sense, Rashid said, after Micki finished. It does sound like Lewis was trying to incite a murderous rage in Jason, a rage that would destroy the last vestiges of his humanity, and turn him into a remorseless killing monster. And the one thing that would definitely do that would be the trauma of having his own mother try to kill him, Ryan added. What a total bastard. So Lewis was using his own sister as a pawn, Micki said with disgust. You should have realized by now that Lewis never allowed anything, even family, to interfere with his ambitions, Rashid told her. But there's still something else that's odd, Ryan said. After the incident in the woods, there weren't any killings until the ones in 1979, and Jason didn't actually start his killing spree until a year later when he supposedly killed the counselor who killed his mother. The reason for that is quite simple, Rashid said. Upon reading Mrs. Voorhees' diaries, I got the distinct impression that Jason wasn't very close to his father. From what I could gather, Mr. Voorhees was still very much a Mennonite in his attitude toward his son, so their relationship was very formal. Thus, I believe that killing his father didn't have the same traumatic effect on Jason that killing his mother would have. So I guess you're saying that when the counselor cut Pamela's head off, it was what finally set him off? Micki added. We can only assume, Rashid said. But, Ryan started to say, but was cut off when the phone started to ring. Ryan quickly got up out of his recliner and picked up the phone, which was sitting on the side table next to the couch. Hello? It was Phil Raymond. Hey, Stephen, got some good news. Dr. Bob talked to the sheriff, and he gave us the okay to check out the stuff. Great, Ryan said. Thing is, you only got an hour, and I've got to go with you, which is fine with me, because I need to go over there anyway and check out something myself. That'll be fine with us, Ryan agreed. Great, Phil said. How many people can I expect? There's going to be 3 of us. My cousin brought in an expert in antiquities to look at the book. Sounds interesting, Phil said. Let me say it around 7 o'clock in front of the sheriff's office, okay? Sounds good, Ryan said. Great, Phil said enthusiastically. I'll be waiting. Phil Raymond put down the phone, leaving a bloody handprint on the receiver. Others might have been concerned about leaving evidence, but Phil wanted to leave his calling card. I love it when things go my way, he commented half to himself. He looked around at his handiwork and marveled. To him, it was a work of art. You surprise me, Philip, the voice said. I thought you'd want to get this over with. Oh, I do, he said, now fully aloud since he didn't have to worry about anyone hearing him. Well, anyone alive, that was. But I need a bit of time to make myself more presentable for my big performance. He looked down at the blood-soaked surgical gown and tennis shoes. He figured he'd have more than enough time to go home and get cleaned up before the time came for him to call the sheriff's office and start the drama he'd so obsessively scripted to begin. Chapter 14. The Supernatural. The shoot at Voorhees' house had gone very well, and Carol was pleased with the footage they got. She thought the material dealing with the so-called hellworms added just the right amount of creepiness. Also, she felt the dilapidated old Voorhees house made an excellent backdrop for her monologue on the information she'd gathered on Elias and Pamela Voorhees. Hell, they'd even managed to find time to shoot some fill-in footage of Sean dressed up as Jason, walking past the house and chopping through the bushes. But now it was time for the part of the shoot that would finally bring all their work together. Sean turned the green van onto the dirt road next to the old faded sign that read, Camp Crystal Lake. "Welcome to Camp Blood," Sean said. "The home of the oversex counselors and the axe-wielding super killer man," Jamal commented from the back of the van. "The party town, USA." "And you're forgetting our final destination before we can get out of this shithole of a town," Carol added. "That is if we ever leave," Sean said ominously. "Remember the legend, very few people ever leave Camp Blood." Carol shook her head. "Well, it appears we're not alone," Sean said, as the van cleared the trees and approached the horseshoe of weathered cabins. In front of the first cabin was what looked like a modified hearse, with the spooky-looking Grim Reaper painted along its side. As Sean parked the van in front of the second cabin, a couple of dark-clad goth people came out of the first cabin and approached the van. "Well, Dorothy, we're definitely not in Kansas anymore." "How long have you two been here?" Carol asked the couple as she got out of the van. "A couple of hours," the female goth said. "Are these two something we should know about?" Sean asked, thoroughly confused. "Oh, I guess I forgot," Carol said. "This is Morgana." The pale goth girl smiled at him with deep red lips. "And this is Julius." The tall, pale, thin male goth standing next to Morgana smiled as well, showing his glistening white fang teeth. "They're both mediums I hired to do a little seance tonight so we might contact some of Jason's victims," Carol continued, "or even possibly Mrs. Voorhees herself." "Actually, I'm a mental medium, so the spirits will speak through me," Morgana told him. "Julius is a physical medium, so he gets images of the past from objects and can be used as a conduit for the spirits to physically interact in our world, move objects and such." "Excuse my ignorance, Chief, but didn't you say earlier that you didn't believe in all this supernatural stuff?" "Oh, it don't matter if she do or she don't, man," Jamal said from behind Sean, startling him. "It's all about the show." "Well, it seems you actually have some brain cells that aren't burned out in that noggin of yours, pothead," Carol commented. "Either one of ye want to have a light with me and party?" Jamal asked Morgana and Julius, pulling out a fresh joint from his jean jacket. "But not for long," Carol said, shaking her head. "No thanks," Morgana said. "In our line of work, we need to keep a clear mind." Then suddenly Morgana began to shake. Julius grabbed a hold of her. "Oh my God, something's trying to come through." "Oh, give me a break," Carol said, putting her hands on her hips and shaking her head. Morgana's eyes rolled back in her head, so only the white showed. She began to groan. Then her shaking turned into all-out spasms, making it hard for Julius to keep a hold of her. Then a gravelly old voice emerged from her throat.
"I'm a messenger of God. You're doomed if you stay here. This place is cursed. Cursed. I got to warn you. You're doomed if you stay. Go." "It's got a death curse."
"Would you please save that shit for the camera?" Carol yelled at Morgana, annoyed. This seemed to bring Morgana out of her attack. She slumped in Julius's arms. You could have killed her by doing that, Julius yelled at Carol hysterically. Just back off the drama, Carol spouted back. I'm not paying you two to entertain us, so back off the possession and warning of doom shit until I tell you to do it. You stupid bitch, Julius said, now enraged. This isn't a game, and we're not acting. Something has given us a warning, and you should listen. Carol looked back over at Sean and Jamal and saw that they both had startled expressions on their face. What? Are you two actually going for this shit? The woman has the gift, Jamal said, and I myself feel the bad mojo of this place. Would you please back off that Jamaican shit for now? Carol told him. I'm really not in the mood for all of this shit. Jamal popped the joint in his mouth, lit it, and took a deep drag. I don't need this shit either. Then he started back toward the van. Call me when you was ready to shoot. Make that the same for me, Sean said as he headed for the cabins. Carol looked over at the two mediums. Morgana seemed to be recovering from her attack. She's nearly got me believing this shit too, she thought. It seemed to her like Morgana looked even more pale than before. If there was any way she could possibly be, that is. Here, let me help you back to the cabin so you can lay down, Julius said to Morgana while giving Carol a cold look. I don't even know why you considered working with that bitch, Carol heard Julius say as he and Morgana disappeared inside the weathered cabin. Carol found herself standing alone in front of the horseshoe of cabins. She shook her head. I'm stuck working with a load of friggin' freaks, she commented. Then she rubbed her temples. She was starting to get a headache. Phil got out of the shower quickly and toweled himself off. The blood from Dr. Bob's murder had soaked through his clothes and caked on his skin. Though it felt good, like a good sweat after a night of lovemaking, it was definitely inappropriate for the part he had to play in his little drama, so he had to clean himself up. Heading over to the mirror behind the sink, he inspected himself. Though he definitely looked pale and had dark circles under his eyes, all it would take was a shave, hair combing, and some fresh clothes, and he'd be ready for his big performance. A few minutes later, after he'd fixed his hair and shaved, he'd headed into his bedroom where he set out his clothes. One at a time, he put on a dark pair of Ben Davis jeans, steel-toed hiking boots, dark blue knit sweater, and his favorite black London Fog full-length trench coat. He headed over to the full-length mirror in the corner and looked at himself. Perfect, he said, nodding at his reflection with satisfaction. Just plain old boring Phil. He laughed at himself. It was the perfect disguise. Himself. We have no time to waste on vanity, the voice said. Freeman and his associates will be coming to meet you soon. I know what time it is, Phil said with slight annoyance as he fixed a stray hair. I've got everything under control. But what about the distraction? The voice pushed. The office is locked up, so no one can find my little display until I'm ready, he said confidently. All I need is to make one phone call, he said, patting his jean pocket that held his cell phone. Have some faith. Pothead, keep your camera focus on me, Carol said as she straightened her hair and shook out all her nervousness. All ready, darling, Jamal said. Action, Carol said, and immediately assumed the calm, friendly expression she always took on when she was on camera. Around me are the charred remains of what had once been Vince Fantara's traveling funhouse and carnival, which is right next to the main cabins of Camp Crystal Lake. She waved her hand at the remains in the distance of a blackened carousel. This ruin, once a place of joy and frolic, became a place of horror as Carney Mitch Deaver went on a rampage with his dog and murdered a large number of patrons, as well as starting a fire that destroyed this carnival. Then Carol moved closer into the camera. Locals say that Mitch Deaver was possessed by Jason Voorhees' spirit, which took control of him when he put Jason's hockey mask on. Mitch Deaver's case is only one of 4 such incidents that have happened since Jason was supposedly sent to hell. Then she let out a breath. Cut! How was that? Riveting, darling. Absolutely riveting, Jamal said, putting down the camera and putting on his sunglasses. I really think the Oscars are missing something here if they don't consider your performance. All right, kiss ass, she said. Oh, but I agree, Chief, Sean said from his spot next to Jamal at the sound equipment. 2 kiss asses, she said. Then she looked over at Julius. Julian, or whatever your name is, get over to the carousel and do your thing. Then she ordered Jamal and Sean to move the equipment to the carousel. Then she quickly set up. When they were finished, Carol was working the sound equipment while Sean was holding a long metal rod with the microphone on the end over Julius's head. Action, Carol ordered. Now, Julian. My name is Julius, he corrected her. Whatever, Carol said. Anyway, Julius, after I introduce you, you touch the horse next to you and do your spiel and make it good. It's not an act, Julius told her. I don't even know if I'll get anything. I don't give a shit. You're wasting my film. Now stop yammering and just do as I said, Carol said, annoyed. Then she calmed herself. Julius Blackwell is what is known as a physical medium, which means that he can read objects past as well as supposedly allow spirits to move objects. Julius will now touch one of these horses from the carousel, which was part of Fonterra's traveling carnival. It is our hope that he'll be able to give us some insight into the events of that night so many months ago. Carol waved at Julius. Julius put his hand on the horse's head. Immediately a jolt went through his body. I see a blonde girl with her hair done in multiple braids walking up to me. She is wearing an orange and black cheerleader outfit, he said, his voice slightly slurred and distant. She definitely knows me. I know her. Her name is Misty. She is not afraid of me, even though I'm holding a tire iron. I start twirling the tire iron like a baton. She is amused by my clowning. She compliments me. She calls me Buzzy. What the hell is this? Carol commented, hoping it didn't get on the soundtrack. Then she starts talking to me about her boyfriend, Julius continues. She is angry at him. He left her and she got lost. I'm surprised by her actions. She hasn't commented about the mask I'm wearing. Actually, what she doesn't know is I'm wearing 2 masks, one inside the other. The mask on the outside is the mask I wear all the time, a bee mask with a stinger for a nose. It is the mask people laugh at. The other is the mask I found in the tree. It is an angry mask, a mask that wants to hurt. Julius went on to talk about how the person wearing the multiple mask was named Teddy, and that he had been a weakling that the football team picked on all the time. Then he talked about the angry mask and how it made Teddy big and strong. Then Misty notices I'm different. She thinks I'm someone else, someone who is trying to trick her. This freak is really good, Carol thought as she listened to him. She tried to get away, but I grab her. Then she sees my surprise. Her knitting needle sticking out of the nose of the bee mask. Julius continued, but it appeared he was getting agitated. Oh my God! I ram it into her neck. Tears began to stream down his cheeks. My God! The blood! The blood is... He screamed. Then he let loose of the horse and fell to the ground. He started shaking and curled up into a ball. What the hell did you do to him? Morgana screamed as she ran up to him. My God, Julius! Morgana dropped to her knees and scooped Julius up into her arms. Are you crazy? You should have stopped this the moment he started having trouble. Everything looked fine to me, Carol said. Morgana glared up at her. Look at him, she said angrily. Does this look fine to you? Carol shook her head. Will you get off of it? Carol said. I'm not impressed with you or your boyfriend's theatrics. Have all the fun you like in front of the camera, but when it goes off, back off this shit, okay? I don't believe in all this supernatural shit, and the two of you rolling around on the ground with foam coming out of your mouths isn't going to convince me. Tears began to well in Morgana's eyes. This isn't going to end good. I can feel it inside. We're playing with something that shouldn't be played with. I can't understand why I even got involved in this. Because you're getting paid well to do it? Carol reminded her coldly. In the end, that's all that matters, the payoff. Sean dropped the pole he was holding and went over to Morgana. Here, he said, holding out his hand. Let's get him back to the cabin. Thanks, Morgana said, thoughtfully, as they both tried to get Julius up onto his wobbly feet. Hell, why aren't you helping the prima donnas too, pothead? Carol asked dismissively. I'm busy with the camera, darling, he said as he panned and followed the others as they headed toward the cabins. What? You're still shooting? She said. You never said to cut, he said simply. I would assume you'd get the idea when all the trouble started. I don't assume nothing, darling, he told her. I be figuring that it'd be better to waste a film than hear you bitch because you figured I jumped the gun. Point taken, Carol said. Then it's clear that I don't want any more footage shot. Yeah. Then shut off the fucking camera, she yelled at him. Phil waited in the alley near the sheriff's office. The time had come to put his plan into motion. Everything was ready. On his way, he'd stopped by the coroner's office and unlocked the entryway door. And for extra effect, he thrashed Guadalupe's desk and knocked over one of the file cabinets. Taking out his phone, he called 911. Then he pulled out a handkerchief and put it between his mouth and the phone. 911 emergency, what is your crisis? A female voice said on the other end of the phone. Oh my God, I need the sheriff right away, he yelled into the phone. What's wrong, sir? You need to tell me what's wrong, the woman said. They're dead! Oh my God, I found them! There was blood all over the place, he said, amazed at his own performance. Sir, where are you? You need to tell me where it happened, the woman told him. I just came to identify my brother. I didn't expect to find... But the woman cut him off. Sir, where did you find the bodies? The coroner's office! Oh my God! He said, raising his voice hysterically. You would actually expect to find them there, sir, the woman said. No, you stupid cow, Phil screamed into the phone. I mean the coroner and the lady from the front desk are dead. Someone cut them open. How long ago did you find them? The woman said, still amazingly composed. I just did a few minutes ago. Oh my God, he said. Get somebody over here. The killer might still be around, Phil said. Then he hung up. I must commend you on your performance, the voice said. Yeah, I must say that was Academy Award material, Phil said. Just as long as it does the job. Then he heard the wail of police sirens. And now it begins. Chapter 15. Drama. Ryan saw the flashing blue and red lights of the sheriff's cars as he drove his truck down Main Street. There was a large crowd of people gathering in the area of the occurrence, so he couldn't make out exactly which building was involved. "Is this a regular occurrence?" Rashid asked from beside the passenger door next to Micki. "Shouldn't we see what's going on?" Micki asked before Ryan had a chance to answer Rashid. Ryan looked at his watch. "Phil said to meet him at 7 o'clock, and it's nearly that now." "But what if it's something important?" Micki asked. "It is imperative that we study the Necronomicon," Rashid said. "Anything else is of lower priority." "But what if it's something related to the murders?" Micki asked. "How could it be?" Ryan replied. "We've already figured out that it's the mask that's possessing people, and it's safely tucked away at the sheriff's office, so how could anything going on right now be associated with it?" "I don't know," Micki said, looking concerned. "I've got a bad feeling about this." Meanwhile, Phil was waiting in front of the sheriff's office when Ryan and the others drove up. "It's about time," Phil said, looking at his watch as Ryan got out of the truck. "I really doubt the sheriff would be willing to give you and your guest an extension if you were late." "Sorry about that. We had to do a bit of detouring to get here," Ryan told him. "By the way, you got any idea what's going on back there?" "No, not really," Phil said. "But you know how it's been with all the tourists around here." "I would have thought you'd have had to go right through the middle of all that on your way from the coroner's office," Ryan said. "It was really dead when I left there," he told Ryan, "but it's been a while since I left." Just then, Rashid came up to them. "Oh, Phil," Ryan said. "This is Rashid. He's the antique specialist I mentioned." "It's a pleasure," Rashid said, giving Phil a slight bow. "It is most unfortunate that I had to interrupt your conversation, gentlemen, but I believe it is most important that we proceed." "I agree with Rashid," said Micki, who was standing just behind the Egyptian mystic. "Well then, let's get this show on the road," Phil said, pleasantly, as he led them into the sheriff's office building. Sheriff Lloyd Landis honked his horn and turned on the flashing lights on top of his patrol car as he approached the crowd of people who had gathered in the street in front of the Cunningham County Coroner's office. He saw mixed in with the tourists and onlookers were a large contingent of reporters that had hung around town since his press conference the other day. Silently he cursed. How the hell had they found out about this so fast? My God, he thought. They're like carry on waiting for a feast. He honked again and the crowd parted to let him through. He swung his patrol car around and parked right in front of the entrance to the building. He saw that Deputy Court was standing beside the entrance waiting for him. "Court, give me the lowdown," he said as he got out of his patrol car. "I've called Buck and Roy and the new guy, Justin, and got all them doing crowd control. I've also called in a couple of unis from the highway patrol and some help from Clear Springs as well," Court told him. "And I called the coroner's office in Essex, and they're sending someone too. Well, you know." "Understood," Landis said, his stomach clenching at the thought of what happened to Bob. "And the crime scene?" "I'm the only one who's been in there besides whoever found the bodies." "Don't tell me our witness took a hike," Landis said. "Unfortunately, yeah," Court confirmed. "But I don't blame them. It's really nasty in there. I had to run outside myself and puke when I saw it." Landis felt his stomach clench again. He knew if Court couldn't keep his lunch, then he was assuredly not going to be able to keep control. The thought of doing it in front of this crowd and all the media outside the building was not exactly a comforting thought. Yet he knew it was his responsibility as sheriff to look over the scene. "Would you like me to lock down the crime scene until the coroner from Wessex arrives?" Court asked, as if reading the sheriff's mind. "No, I really should check the scene for myself," Landis told him, though he appreciated the out Court offered. "Are you sure about that, sir?" Court asked, surprised. Landis gave Court a stern look. "I'm positive. You stay here and keep those vultures back. You got that, Court?" "Crystal clear, Sheriff," Court said. Landis knew Court got the message and would try his utmost to avoid an embarrassing situation. Putting on his best authoritative facade, Landis headed through the doorway into the entry hall. Somebody had some fun, he thought, as he looked at the overturned file cabinet and scattered papers that littered the desk. Heading down the hall, he entered the examination room. The sight that met his eyes was appalling. The floor was splattered with blood and tossed guts. The walls were decorated in bloody letters that read, "Jason lives," over and over again. This particular touch made a chill run up Landis's spine. It reminded him of the cave on Crystal Hill. Of the 8 bodies he could count scattered around the room, most of them on gurneys, only the 2 bodies on 2 of the main exam tables were uncovered. "Oh my God, Bob, what kind of monster could do this to you?" Landis said, looking down at the body of his old friend. Not only had the killer split Bob open from chest to groin and placed his internal organs on the table next to him, but they'd also castrated him and sewn his genitals to his forehead. Landis barely held back the bile that threatened to come up in his throat. One thing he didn't want to do was contaminate the crime scene. No, of all the freaks he'd brought down over the years, this was the one he most wanted. This one was personal. Landis moved on to the next of the killer's hideous displays. He recognized the woman as Bob's Mexican receptionist. What the hell was her name? He asked himself. Luisa? Consuela? Maria? He couldn't recall. All he knew was that this killing really looked personal. The killer had gone out of his way to show how he killed this woman by leaving the black feathered boa firmly wrapped around her neck. Though the killer had cut the woman open like Bob, they'd shown their disrespect for her by throwing her internal organs all over the floor. Then the killer had pulled the woman's eyes out of their sockets and laid them on top of the sockets to make them look bugged out. Then they'd cut the sides of the woman's mouth wider and formed it into a sardonic grin. The killer finished her off by taking the woman's red lipstick and smeared it around her mouth like some sadistic clown makeup. Upon seeing this grotesque parody, Landis found he couldn't hold back any longer. Luckily, he managed to catch sight of some large specimen bags sitting on a nearby counter. He quickly grabbed the bag and got it open just in time for the upsurge of bile. Phil, followed by Stephen Freeman, Stephen's cousin, and Rashid, walked up to the desk located next to the door to the evidence room. Behind the desk was a fat, balding deputy Phil knew as Ed Marlin. "Hey, Ed, I got an authorization here from the sheriff to let these people have a look at the stuff that was taken from the Voorhees house a few years ago," Phil told the deputy, holding up his forged paperwork. The heavy deputy looked up at him from his desk, where he had a half cup of coffee and a half-eaten glazed donut sitting in front of him. "Oh, could you come back in a bit? The sheriff's on call, and we're a bit understaffed at the moment." Phil was surprised by this. "Excuse me?" "I said the sheriff's out on a call," Deputy Marlin repeated. "And that matters why?" Phil asked, confused with a twinge of sarcasm. "It's just that I'd feel more secure if I got the authorization straight from the sheriff," Deputy Marlin said. "Well, that went well," the voice in Phil's head said. "I would think of something fast if I were you." "I don't give a flying," Phil blurted out, but then he calmed himself down. "Look, Ed." He put the paper in front of Deputy Marlin and pointed at the signature section. "The sheriff has already given his authorization." "I understand that, Phil. The thing is, the sheriff and most of the staff are out of the office. I don't think he'd be too pleased if I leave the desk unattended at this time." "We were told to be here at this time to view this stuff," Phil told him. "I'm sorry, I really can't leave this desk unattended, and I'm certainly not going to let you people go digging around in there all alone," Deputy Marlin said, taking a bite of his donut and following it with a sip of coffee. "Sir, if it is a matter of trust we're dealing with," Rashid said, "I can assure you, if you had to leave us unattended at any time, we would not touch anything in the room other than that which we've come here to study," Rashid told him. "Damn it, Ed, these people are all on a limited schedule," Phil said. So, couldn't you give us a break as a favor to me? I don't know. This seems like a mighty big favor, Deputy Marlin said, wiping the crumbs off his lips with a paper towel. Well, how can I compensate you for your inconvenience? Give him whatever he asked for, the voice instructed him. How about you give me a little introduction to that sweet-looking little lady who works at your office? Guadalupe? Phil said, trying to sound surprised. My God, does every scummy piece of shit in this town want a piece of that bitch's ass? I'll see what I can do, but I think her dance card is full at the moment. But you'll try? Deputy Marlin asked. Oh, sure, Phil said, smiling. In his mind, he was envisioning Guadalupe the way he'd left her back at the coroner's office. He felt the tingle in his crotch again. I'm sure she'll be really open to the idea. Good, Deputy Marlin said, smiling back at him. Meanwhile, Sheriff Landis came out of the coroner's office and headed over to Deputy Court. I'm heading back to the office, the sheriff told Court. You'll be in charge here. Contact me when the coroner from Essex arrives. And that, sir? Court asked, indicating a plastic bag full of brownish liquid the sheriff was carrying with him. Landis looked down at the bag. That isn't evidence, Landis informed him in a low tone. And you didn't see it, Court. Oh, perfectly clear, sir, Court said with a knowing expression. With that, Sheriff Landis headed back to his patrol car and got in. After starting it up, he made a wide turn, trying to avoid bumping into the crowd that had gathered in front of the coroner's office. The media people closed in on the car and started banging on it and yelling questions through the window. Landis waved them off and continued to slowly try to maneuver his car out of the crowd. Finally, the crowd opened up and let the sheriff through, though some of the media people continued to pursue him. Landis sped up his car and left the last of the media behind. All he wanted to do was get back to the secure haven of his office, have a strong cup of coffee, take an aspirin for his headache, and just simply get away from the insanity outside. I'm trusting you people to be on good behavior and just do what you came here to do, Deputy Ed Marlin said as he led Phil, Stephen Freeman, Freeman's cousin, and Rashid inside the evidence room. There's no need to worry, my friend, Rashid assured him. We will be most swift in our studies. This amused Phil. Oh, yes, and I assure you I'll be swift in what I have to do, too. Swift and bloody, he thought. I have no doubt about that, my dear boy, the voice in his head said. I await the pleasure of seeing the fruition of your plan. Oh, I think you'll be quite amused and impressed, Phil thought back at the voice. Phil was always amazed by the size of the evidence room. Most small-town evidence rooms were nothing more than medium-sized storage rooms with a few wall units to hold evidence boxes. In comparison, the Cunningham County evidence room was a monster, because of all the evidence the sheriff's office had accumulated over the years due to Jason. When the sheriff's office was remodeled 7 years ago, the planners had expanded the evidence room to accommodate the accumulated evidence, as well as making room for what they expected was much more to come. At this time, the evidence room was well over 100 feet long and featured 20 long shelf units. Deputy Marlin led Phil and the others past 2 of the shelf units, which were full of boxes. 1995 Voorhees house. He mumbled to himself as he glanced over a clipboard he'd taken off the wall next to the entrance. He finally stopped in front of another long shelf unit full of boxes. The stuff you're looking for is here, he said. Remember, you only got an hour. Good luck. Rashid looked at the shelf unit questioningly, then he looked over at Deputy Marlin. Do you have a list of the contents of these boxes? The contents are listed on the side of the boxes, Marlin informed him. Well, then we better get started, guys, Stephen Freeman said, grabbing a hold of a rolling stair unit and pulling it over to the shelf unit. Climbing up, he started handing down boxes to his cousin, who would move them over to a table to the left of the shelf units. Rashid went over to the table and started looking at the contents lists. "Would it be possible for you to assist my associates?" Rashid asked a few minutes later, when he noticed that both Phil and Deputy Marlin were just standing and watching. "As Stephen could tell you, I'm still getting over a bug and really shouldn't be toting anything around," Phil told him. "And what about you, officer?" Rashid asked. "My responsibility is to make sure you people don't do anything funny, not to help you carry boxes." "But it would vastly swifthen our pace if you would do this minor service," Rashid said. "I'm sorry, sir, there is nothing in the sheriff's orders nor our agreement stating I help you." "That's fine," Freeman said as he handed yet another box to Micki. "I think we got it here." Rashid shook his head and went back to examining the contents lists. "I would suggest we get on with what we came here to do," the voice said. "Which reminds me, Ed," Phil said to the deputy. "Dr. Bob asked me to take another scraping from the X-Acto knife used in those murders a few days ago. You still got those boxes in the new case area?" "Yeah, but I can't let you do that right now. The sheriff has ordered that no one touch that stuff without his—" "Excuse me?" Phil said, surprised. "The sheriff can't do that. Dr. Bob has jurisdiction over such things." "Well, you'll just have to talk to the sheriff about that, okay?" Deputy Marlin told him. "Well, this plan is working out well," the voice commented. Phil could see that he was going to have trouble with this situation. He could feel his perfect plan coming down around his head. "I would suggest you think of something fastful," the voice ordered. "Ah, here it is," he heard Rashid say from the table. At that moment, Phil got an odd feeling, almost electric. He knew something was about to happen, something big. Stephen Freeman and Micki came over to the table and watched as Rashid dug through the box and finally pulled out the grotesquely bound volume. "Maybe I won't have to," Phil said under his breath. The Egyptian held the book in both hands and closed his eyes for a moment. All watching were surprised as Rashid's hand started to shake and a groan escaped his lips. "What the hell is that about?" Deputy Marlin asked. "You got me," Freeman said. "Are you all right, Rashid?" Micki asked, concerned. Rashid opened his eyes and looked up at her. "I'm doing quite well, Micki. This book is most definitely authentic, which makes me wonder what is locked up in the archives at Miskatonic University." "How can you tell?" Micki asked. "Come and find out for yourself," Rashid said, holding out the book to her. Micki took the book and immediately fell to the floor, her body spasming wildly. "Oh, dear gods, what have I done?" Rashid said, rushing around the table and bending down beside her. "Take the book away from her!" Stevens yelled at Rashid. Rashid tried to pull the book away from her, but it appeared Micki had it in a death grip. Watching this, Phil silently thanked the Ancient Ones for the distraction. With everyone's attention focused on Micki, his way was now open to collect his prize. Okay, guys, this has been chapters 13, 14, and 15 of Friday the 13th, The Mask of Jason Voorhees. Wow, guys, I did not expect Phil to go full psycho yet, not until he had the mask. So, rest in peace, Dr. Bob and Guadalupe. Their deaths were brutal. I mean, I really didn't see that coming. That was a punch to the gut. But, and now, it looks like he's about to get a hold of the mask. And we know what happened in the other 4 books once somebody put that mask on. And if he's already this dark and this psychotic before putting the mask on, dear God, what's going to happen when it goes on? I gotta say, I'm enjoying this book still, tying the TV series into Jason Goes to Hell and the Crystal Lake book series. It just flows together, I think, and I'm really enjoying that. So I want to know what you guys think of the book so far. It looks like pretty soon the shit's really going to hit the fan as soon as he puts that mask on. I don't think we've had a killer in Mother's Day, Jason's Curse, Carnival, or Road Trip that has been as sick and psycho as Phil has. So I'm really interested to see where this is going to go once he puts that on, and what Lewis's full plan is. And what y'all think of old Morgana channeling, Julius channeling old Ralph? What did you guys think of that? I want to know in the comment section about that part too. It's like old Ralph is back from the grave to give his "it's got a death curse, it's cursed" warnings back to a new generation of people at the camp. So yeah, he did it through this Julius guy, but he's right back to his old ways of letting everybody know about that Camp Blood death curse. Alright guys, we'll find out what happens next when I return with more of Friday the 13th, The Mask of Jason Voorhees. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and what did you say, old Ralph? What was it you said?
It's got a death curse!
Hi, this is William Pattison, known to Friday the 13th fans as Eric Morris, and you are watching the 80s Slasher Librarian's narration of my book, The Mask of Jason Voorhees. Yeah. Enjoy.